one number to rule them all. South Korea's radical quest for scientific sovereignty. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we sift through fascinating ideas to unearth the truly important insights. Today we're tackling a question that, well, if true, could fundamentally reshape our entire understanding of reality. What if everything we know about the universe, from the smallest subatomic GANs to the grand cosmic ballet, could ultimately be described by a single number? It's almost too simple, right? A bit counterintuitive. Exactly. Yet that's the audacious proposition of a groundbreaking new theory, called OPS, or the one-parameter solution, at its heart. OPS, spearheaded by director 양동봉, presents itself as nothing less than a revolution in thinking. It aims to interpret the universe, and maybe even the very essence of life, through a singular numerical order and pattern. And here's where it gets truly provocative. OPS doesn't just tweak existing scientific models. It directly challenges the bedrock assumptions of modern science. It really goes for the foundations. We're talking about its inherent complexity, its reliance on a sprawling array of symbols, its dependence on, well, seemingly arbitrary units, and even the absolute nature of physical constants. We've long considered unchanging things like the speed of light, right? OPS really embraces this idea that science is not about completion, but about questions it fundamentally asks. Have we been looking at this all wrong? It's an incredibly bold stance. And what's fascinating here, I think, is that OPS isn't merely suggesting we modify our current theories. It's putting forward a completely different structural interpretation tool, a new tool. Yeah, think of it as almost like a new operating system for understanding the universe. It suggests we need to move beyond just precise measurement, and instead focus on discerning the underlying structure and order of physical phenomenon. Structure and order. And this framework, it operates on the premise that, while every established truth is ultimately temporary, science only truly progresses because it's always open to being proven wrong, always fallible. That's a humbling perspective for science. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack exactly how OPS proposes to achieve this monumental rewrite of scientific understanding. What are the practical implications of these frankly radical ideas? And perhaps most intriguingly, what does all this mean for South Korea's ambitious vision for what they call science sovereignty? A lot to cover there. It's a lot to dig into. So let's not waste any time and jump straight into the core pillars of OPS. Okay, so our universe as modern physics describes it, it's incredibly intricate. Absolutely layers upon layers. Everywhere we look, general relativity, quantum mechanics, we find this dense web of, well, countless constants and incredibly complex equations. It feels like an ever-expanding library of distinct rules. Almost bewilderingly complex sometimes. But what if all that apparent complexity was in fact an illusion? That's precisely the radical redefinition OPS offers. It posits rather dramatically that nature is sufficiently explained by a single number. Wow, okay, one number. Yeah, this isn't just about simplification for its own sake. It's a claim that all these complex phenomena don't actually need an endless list of parameters. Instead, they originate from a singular numerical order. Something rooted in fundamental ratio symmetry and pattern. Ratio symmetry. Exactly. OPS argues that all physical quantities, when you strip them down to their essence, can be interpreted around a single dimensionless number. Dimensionless meaning no units. Get to that. But yes, essentially, it raises an important question for us, doesn't it? Have we been overcomplicating things, maybe inventing a new constant for every little thing, rather than seeking a deeper unified numerical source? Mind-bending shift right there, from complexity to a single source. But OPS doesn't stop there, does it? It also challenges the very language we use. Mathematics itself. That's right, for centuries we've relied on traditional math. It's rigorous logic, specific operations, and those symbols that, let's be honest, can be intimidating. Sigma, integral signs, square root. They're powerful tools, no doubt. Oh, absolutely precise, yes, but often a barrier for many people. And this leads us to OPS's concept of a universal syntax, or ochero. In Korean, the assertion here is profound. The universe speaks in numbers, not math. Numbers, not math. What's the distinction they're making? It means the fundamental truth, according to OPS, lies not in the symbols or the abstract operations we've constructed, but in the inherent structure and relationships of numbers themselves. Take Einstein's iconic MC, for example. OPS wouldn't express this with those symbols. Instead, energy, mass, the speed of light, they'd be converted into dimensionless numbers, and their fundamental relationship would be reconfigured as a pure numerical ratio. It's not just changing the notation. It's reconceptualizing the relationship itself. So it's about the underlying ratio, not the equation as we write. Exactly. And what's particularly intriguing is that this grammar is designed, they say, for intuitive understanding, making it accessible even without years of advanced mathematical training. Wow, that suggests a profound democratization of scientific understanding. If you don't need advanced calculus to grasp the universe's basic language, what barriers does that remove? A fascinating thought, isn't it? What new insights might emerge from a broader range of human intuition? Yeah, okay, moving to another foundational concept. Units we're taught SI base units, meters, seconds. Kilograms are these absolute universal standards. They feel fundamental. They're deeply ingrained in how we do science and even just daily life. Totally. But OPS challenges this. It states quite clearly units are merely human convenience. Nature only contains a dimensionless numerical order. Human convenience. Okay, so what's the proposal? The proposal is essentially to unify all SI base units to a value of 1, effectively discarding units entirely. Discard units. How does that even work? How do we measure things? Well, think of it like this: units are like labels. We attach meters or kilograms, OPS says. Let's stop focusing on the labels and look at the pure ratio. So instead of saying something is X meters long, you'd say its length is X times some fundamental unit length, which itself is just 1. It changes how we see physical quantities. They become less about absolute sizes and more about fundamental ratios. I see. So it's about proportionality. Exactly. OPS believes the stripping away of units reveals an inherent numerical order that may be ironically units currently obscure. That's a huge shift. Okay. So if units are just human constructs, then what about physical constants? The big ones. The pillars of modern physics. Speed of light c, the cosmic speed limit, gravitational constant g. How mass attracts Planck's constant h, the quantum cornerstone. The fine structure constant alpha for electromagnetism. Right? And the cosmological constant that's tied to the universe's expansion. We treat these as absolute numbers derived from experiments. But we don't really know why they have those specific values. They seem almost arbitrary, don't they? Just numbers? We plug into equations because experiments tell us to. Well, OPS offers a compelling reinterpretation here. It says these aren't unknowable fixed values. They are values whose positions are determined within a numerical structure. Determined with lineality. Okay, so predictable. Potentially what's fascinating is OPS's focus on the number 137. Which is the inverse of that fine structure constant. I've heard physicists puzzle over that. Right? OPS identifies 137 as the universe's vibration frequency and a core number connecting all structures. It goes further in numbers like pi for circles and waves, the base of natural logarithms in growth and decay. Along with basic integers like 23 and 5. OPS sees these not just as mathematical tools we use. They're seen as key vertices of interconnected numerical phase structures, like part of the universe's essential architecture. Constants aren't just numbers we measure. They're landmarks in this numerical structure. Sure, that's a good way to put it. This reinterpretation suggests they aren't arbitrary results, but fundamental building blocks integral to reality. OPS shifts the perspective, seeing constants as the beginning of mathematics, not the end of physics. Beginning of mathematics, not the end of physics. That's really insightful. It implies a whole new level of understanding. Potentially predict exactly if you understand the structure, you might be able to derive the constant. But OPS goes even deeper, doesn't it? Challenging geometry itself. We all learned Euclidean geometry. A point has position, no size, infinite points make a line symbol. Seems simple, but OPS brings up a critical paradox. If a point truly has zero size, how can an infinite number of zeros add up to create a length? Yeah, that's always felt a bit abstract. It's a mathematical abstraction that maybe doesn't quite map to physical reality. OPS challenges this by positing that a point must possess a minimum quantum link, or what it calls a physically existing structural unit. It defines a point as the smallest numerically distinguishable existence. So not zero size, the smallest possible size. Right? So from this perspective, length and direction aren't formed by continuously accumulating zero-length points. It's the arrangement of these minimum points, their specific numerical relationships, that creates length and direction. Arrangement like pixels on a screen. Sort of. It connects directly back to those dimensionless numbers we talked about, pi 137, within this deeper structural framework. It's like saying the fundamental unit isn't infinitesimal. It's the smallest unit of information and their pattern makes the reality. Fundamentally redefines geometry. Are there any existing frameworks OPS draws on for this? Or is it completely novel? It feels like it would ripple through everything. It's largely presented as a novel concept within OPIIS itself. You could maybe see faint echoes in things like discrete math, or certain lattice models in physics, which sometimes use fundamental units. But OPS takes it much further by directly linking this point unit to pi E137. Embedding it right into the universe's supposed core numerical structure. It's not just a puzzle for them, it's foundational. It's foundational, and that leads to maybe their most ambitious claim. Yet unifying the micro and macro worlds and even mind and matter. Yeah, this is where it gets really expansive. I mean, for over a century, quantum mechanics for the small stuff and general relativity for the big stuff, they just haven't played well together. Mathematically, the great unsolved problem in physics. Consciousness that's largely been outside of science altogether. So how does OPS even begin to tackle? It's incredibly ambitious. OPS proposes that alpha, the fine structure constant, and lambda, the cosmological constant, are actually twin constants. Wins how so? Originating from the same underlying numerical structure. And they're connected, OPS claims, by what they call the mind equation or life equation. Mind equation. Okay, is that a formula? Not really a formula like EMMC-HA, it's more of a profound conceptual framework. It posits a fundamental numerical relationship between these constants that also somehow underlies the emergence of consciousness and the structure of the universe. So the same patterns govern matter and give rise to life and thought. That's the idea. For example, quantum waves might be interpreted not as abstract probabilities, but as repetitive patterns in number sequences. Space-time curvature then could be seen as distortions in these symmetrical number structures. It's about seeing all cosmic phenomena from the smallest quantum ripple to the largest galaxy cluster, and even the spark of life itself as expressions of these underlying dimensionless number symmetry. Okay, so it's clear, OPS isn't just another physics theory. You mentioned it's presented as a new thinking framework, a cognitive tool. Exactly, director 양동봉 emphasizes this. It's designed to interpret and structure any problem, not just scientific ones. So it could apply anywhere, even in our daily lives. That's precisely the claim. OPS introduces the OPS thinking system origin pattern structure. It's a three-stage system designed not just to solve problems, but maybe more importantly to reframe them first. Yeah, instead of jumping straight to solutions, it encourages you to first identify the fundamental origin, the core elements of a situation, then discern the recurring patterns and how these elements interact, and finally understand the overarching structure that holds it all together. Can you give an example like outside of physics? Sure, imagine, say, a complex business problem like falling sales. Instead of just brainstorming quick fixes, you'd use OPS. First identify the origin, core product features, market needs, key competitors, then observe the pattern. Repeating customer complaints, competitor price changes, seasonal trends. Finally, map the structure, the company's hierarchy, the supply chain, the competitive landscape, so you understand the whole system before trying to fix one part. Precisely, it allows for a deeper, more systemic understanding. Before you intervene, they suggest its applicability across, well, everything: literacy, coaching, leadership, organizational innovation, tech strategy. It's about seeing the fundamental patterns no matter the field. That's a powerful framework, pushing us to ask why and how before what to do. This kind of radical challenge to established thinking, though it inevitably makes you think of history. Right, absolutely. Figures who faced isolation, ridicule for daring to question established truths. OPS seems to be consciously positioning itself in that tradition. Yeah, if you connect this to the bigger picture, the history of science is just full of these stories. Like Galileo, yes, ridiculed for heliocentrism. Ignaz Semmelweis ostracized for just suggesting doctors wash their hands. Ludwig Boltzmann facing decades of resistance over I's Barbara McClintock and her jumping geese. Exactly, Dan Escatman and quasi-crystals. They told him he was a quack. Stanley Prisoner and Prions all faced massive resistance, sometimes scorn. Were eventually vindicated, right? OPS seems to align with that philosophy. Science progresses because it is always fallible, and that other quote truth is always first ignored, then ridiculed, then becomes obvious. A testament to the idea that groundbreaking thinking often starts out looking like heresy. So we've explored OPS as this radical scientific theory, a new cognitive tool. But what's truly fascinating is how this very theoretical framework is being tied to real-world national ambitions. Let's shift focus a bit to its connection with South Korea's vision for science. Yes, this is a crucial part of the story. The sources highlight this interesting paradox for South Korea, a global tech powerhouse, semiconductors, AI, biotech, you name. Absolutely cutting edge in many areas, yet often described maybe internally as a knowledge colony, dependent on Western scientific theories, Western interpretive. And this is where OPS comes in strategically. It's presented as a deliberate move to achieve science independence, to develop South Korea's own interpretive framework, its own knowledge order. So intellectual sovereignty through a new scientific lens. Precisely, OPS is positioned quite boldly as the world's only comprehensive interpretive method. The aim isn't just to unify fragmented theories, but to provide a unique Korea-centric way of understanding the universe. It's an explicit ambition. Then break free from intellectual dependency, become a knowledge leader. That's the narrative. That's undeniably bold, proposing not just a new theory, but a whole new way of thinking and using that as a cornerstone for national scientific independence. And there's a strategy for this, a three-stage plan. Quite detailed, aiming to become a knowledge order proposer on the global stage. So what does that involve? Practically, strategy unfolds in three stages. First is OPS, literacy training. Yeah, integrating OPS style thinking into all levels of education. K-12, university, and even across society. More broadly, the goal is to cultivate a generation that thinks and interprets through this OPS lens, teaching people to read the universe numerically. Wow, okay, stage 2. Stage 2 is establishing OPS-based RD centers. These wouldn't be traditional siloed labs. Think interdisciplinary institutes, physics, life sciences, AI, engineering, even philosophy, all working together. And their mission? To generate original interpretations using the OPS framework. And crucially, create original technologies that might bypass the limitations of existing theories. The original tech based on OPS. Interesting. And Stage 3 is building an international OPS science platform. Basically a Korea-centric interpretive network, international collaboration, but using the OPS interpretive language, aiming to set new global standards for scientific inquiry, becoming a standard-setting nation through their own scientific framework. That's the ambition. It's summed up in that powerful OPS declaration, isn't it? South Korea no longer follows. Now we propose, now we interpret, now we are the standard. Certainly captures the scale of the, but with such a bold declaration, and tying it so closely to national strategy, what are the challenges? Surely there'd be resistance internationally. Absolutely, you've hit on a critical point. The scientific community by its very nature is cautious. Skeptical, it demands rigorous peer review, empirical validation, and OPS challenges so much at once. Introducing a framework that questions fundamental units, constants, even basic geometry, that's guaranteed to meet significant resistance, especially from established institutions. The national angle, linking a supposedly universal scientific theory so directly to a national strategy, while perhaps empowering domestically, could be perceived internationally as, you know, a form of intellectual nationalism that might create hurdles for adoption. Plus the sheer scale of trying to re-educate a global scientific community, and then validating these original technologies. It's a monumental undertaking, needs not just scientific brilliance but huge political will and persistent advocacy. It's an absolutely fascinating blend, isn't it? Cutting-edge theory, a new way of thinking, and geopolitical strategy all rolled into one. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, OPS presents a truly profound challenge to how we understand science. It asks us to consider that maybe the deepest truths aren't in ever more complex equations or dozens of constant, but maybe in simple fundamental numerical structure, right free from the complex symbols and maybe arbitrary units we've relied on for so long. It's a radical idea, and it asks you, the listener, to look at the universe through a completely new lens. What is learning to read the universe? Through these pure numbers, through ratio symmetry? What if that could unlock entirely new ways of thinking? New ways of solving problem? Yeah, and not just in science, but in, well, every aspect of your life, personal challenges, global issues. And if we remember that historical lesson that every established truth shall one day collapse, well, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What hidden structures and patterns are just waiting out there for you to discover them? What if the universe is constantly whispering its secrets in the language of numbers. And all we need to do is learn to listen and to interpret in a fundamentally new way. A final thought to ponder.